Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a genuinely fascinating geopolitical journey. We'll be looking at Eastern Europe from 1956 to 1980, tracking how resistance against Soviet domination completely transformed over 2 decades. Honestly, it's a masterclass in how everyday people can find leverage against a system that seems, well, entirely unbeatable. We're going to see how it shifted from these top-down reform attempts by communist officials right to the rise of an unstoppable, citizen-led resistance from the bottom up. Okay, let's dive into this central paradox. How exactly do you push back against a rigid, heavily armed superpower when literally every conventional avenue for change is practically illegal? It's like a giant puzzle, right? And millions of people living behind the Iron Curtain had to solve it. The evolution of their strategy is nothing short of incredible.
So here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We've got this sprawling history organized into a pretty logical narrative for us. First, we'll look at the boundaries of the bloc, then the Prague Spring, followed by the Brezhnev Doctrine. After that, we'll cover change from below, the powerless pushback, and finally wrap up with the birth of solidarity. Let's get started. Section 1. Boundaries of the bloc. The post-1956 reality. To really understand this resistance, we first have to wrap our heads around the strict geopolitical reality of the time. Following the violent suppression of the 1956 Hungarian uprising, Moscow basically laid down the law with 2 absolute, non-negotiable ground rules. Rule number 1, absolutely no member state could leave the Warsaw Pact military alliance, period. And rule number 2, states had to maintain a strict Communist Party monopoly at all times. These principles were designed to secure Moscow's geostrategic interests and completely block any radical change. They were absolute boundaries. Leaders across the bloc, like Poland's Władysław Gomułka, knew exactly what would happen if they crossed those lines. And, for a long time, they just didn't dare try.
Section 2. The Prague Spring. Reform from above.
Let's move to and see how this builds in the 1960s. So, Czechoslovakia was experiencing such severe economic failure, literally hitting negative growth in 1963, that the ruling Communist Party felt forced to actually attempt internal reform. This was your classic attempt to fix the system from the top down. Look at how fast this escalated. In January 1968, the reformist Alexander Dubček replaces the hardliner Antonin Novotny. By April, the party adopts this action program. Suddenly, censorship is easing up and public debate flourishes in a way nobody had seen for decades. Fast forward to June, and a manifesto called 2,000 Words is published, demanding even deeper reform. The momentum was just dizzying, right? But it was building toward a really tragic climax in August. The driving philosophy behind this whole era is perfectly captured in this quote from Dubček. He wanted to create, quote, socialism with a human face. Now, to be clear, this wasn't a call to embrace Western capitalism or abandon the Warsaw Pact. Not at all. Dubček's project aimed at a more humane, democratic socialism. We're talking consumer rights and civil liberties, all while balancing precariously on Moscow's geopolitical rules. But as we'll see, even that careful balancing act was just way too much for the Soviets. Which brings us to Section 3, the Brezhnev Doctrine, the climax and setback. Despite Prague's constant reassurances of loyalty, Moscow watched this easing of censorship with absolute alarm. They were terrified, and I mean terrified, of a democratic infection spreading across borders and dismantling their entire socialist commonwealth. This paranoia birthed the Brezhnev Doctrine. Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev used this dizzying circular logic to justify unprovoked aggression. He claimed that socialist solidarity fundamentally trumped the state sovereignty of individual nations. Basically, the Warsaw Pact asserted the right to intervene militarily in any member country to save communist rule. And, rather conveniently, Moscow got to be the sole judge of what actually constituted a danger. And this brilliantly illustrates the horrific result. On the night of August 20th to 21st, 1968, some 500,000 Warsaw Pact troops invaded Czechoslovakia. This massive invasion utterly crushed the Prague Spring. But more importantly for our overarching story, it proved definitively that the Communist Party could never, ever be meaningfully reformed from the top down. The limits were set in stone and enforced by tanks. Moving on to Section 4, change from below, the big pivot. That 1968 invasion was a massive watershed moment. It exposed the sheer hopelessness of relying on party-led reforms, which forced citizens across Eastern Europe to radically rethink their entire approach. You can really see the big pivot here. On the left, we have the failed model,
reform from above. It was led by the party, it was idealistic, but it was ultimately crushed by military force because it relied on the existing power structures. On the right, we have the totally new paradigm, change from below. This was led by ordinary citizens. Instead of trying to fix the broken state apparatus, their pragmatism led them to reclaim public life from the ground up. They started building a civil society, what activists called a parallel polis, basically a society operating entirely outside of state control.
We actually see the first major victory of this bottom-up approach in Poland. In the winter of 1970 to 1971, the government randomly announced huge 40% price hikes on basic foods right before Christmas. Naturally, spontaneous working-class protests erupted on the Baltic coast. And crucially, these strikes forced the communist leadership under Gomulka to step down and forced the new government to reverse the price hikes. For the incredibly first time, a communist leadership was actually removed by bottom-up protests. And out of this intense conflict emerged a young, charismatic, popular tribune. You might have heard of him, Lech Walesa.
Let's look at Section 5, the powerless pushback, Helsinki and Charter 77.
As this bottom-up energy grew, citizens actually found a new, completely unexpected weapon: international diplomacy. A major catalyst here was the Helsinki Accords of 1975. 35 governments, including the Soviet bloc, signed on to new security principles. But crucially, Basket 3 of these accords guaranteed respect for human rights and civil freedoms. This inadvertently handed Eastern European dissidents a very powerful legal defense. They could now publicly demand their governments honor the exact international agreements they had just signed. This massive loophole directly sparked the creation of Charter 77 in Czechoslovakia, an informal civic initiative demanding basic human rights.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the philosophical engine behind this movement. The playwright and dissident Václav Havel wrote a seminal essay called The Power of the Powerless. In it, he describes this brilliant mini-narrative of a simple greengrocer. The greengrocer puts up a required "Workers of the World Unite" sign in his shop window. He doesn't actually believe it, he just does it for passive acceptance to avoid trouble. But Havel argued, if that greengrocer simply chooses to stop living the public lie, if he just takes the sign down and speaks his mind, he regains his dignity. Havel brilliantly showed how average conformists could literally defeat totalitarianism just by choosing to live in truth.
This takes us to Section 6, the birth of solidarity, the breakthrough.
So we now have the bottom-up strategy, the legal tools, and the philosophical courage. The final piece of the puzzle was a massive cultural awakening in Poland at the end of the 1970s. 12 million. Just think about that for a second. That is the staggering estimated number of Poles who came out in person to see Pope John Paul II during his pilgrimage to his homeland in June 1979. During this visit, the state practically suspended itself, leaving the stewarding of these vast crowds entirely to the church. It proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that the communist state had utterly failed to atomize and isolate its citizens. The nation experienced itself, together as a unified, powerful community. Right around this same time, we see a historic bridge formed between completely different social classes. In 1976, following more strikes, Warsaw intellectuals formed KOR, the Committee for the Defense of Workers. They offered medical, legal, and financial aid to persecuted workers. Even more incredibly, they published open, uncensored bulletins and actually signed them with their real names and addresses, which under Soviet watch was wildly dangerous. But it meant intellectuals were finally uniting with the working class to build that unstoppable parallel society we talked about earlier. All of this culminated in the triumphant climax of August 1980 at the Dansk shipyard. Armed with a new sense of unity, strong legal frameworks, and real working-class power, the workers went on strike. But listen, they weren't just asking for better wages this time. They demanded independent trade unions and the fundamental right to strike. This historic moment gave birth to the Solidarity movement, proving that the foundation of the Soviet bloc was fundamentally cracking under the weight of its own citizens. So the crucial point is this final, provocative thought. Did the brutal crushing of the Prague Spring's top-down reforms in 1968 actually plant the seeds for the Soviet Union's ultimate downfall from below? By using tanks to prove that top-down reform was literally impossible, Soviet brutality inadvertently forced everyday citizens to innovate. It pushed them to forge the very bottom-up civil society, the parallel polis, and the cross-class solidarity that would eventually dismantle the Iron Curtain entirely.
It's just a profound historical irony, isn't it? It shows us that sometimes the hardest crackdowns only create the very tools that will tear a system apart. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the history around you.